We all know that in the context of the Sino-US chip war, the US government used the security of the chip industry chain as an excuse to force TSMC to invest $120 in the US to build and operate an advanced fab. It has been nearly half a year now. How is the project progressing? Recently, the New York Times published an interview, which also expounded on this point of view. TSMC's establishment of a factory in the United States may only fail because American labor unions have identified TSMC as a sweatshop. The current management of TSMC in the United States is Chinese, of course it is Chinese culture. Workers are American, of course an individualistic culture. There is a great conflict between the two. The Chinese run a business, and what they emphasize is communitarianism, teamwork, and joint efforts. TSMC set up a factory in Phoenix, Arizona, and brought its high-end chip manufacturing technology to the United States with 3,000 engineers. At the same time, they also plan to mass-produce advanced chips in the United States. At that time, the founder of TSMC, Zhang Zhengmo, spoke directly. He said that the establishment of a factory in the United States was entirely in response to the US chip policy. The subtext was that TSMC did not want to come to the United States at all. Due to the cultural conflict between Chinese and American people, the current American trade unions have identified TSMC as a sweatshop. Before TSMC moved to the United States, it had considered cultural conflicts. Americans were unwilling to work overtime, Americans were not easy to manage, and Americans were not efficient, so they brought engineers directly from Taiwan province. This also shows a very important thing. Culture, especially corporate culture, production culture, manufacturing culture, education culture, and engineer culture will indeed affect the efficiency of the company, especially for a high-tech company like TSMC. This really fulfills the old saying of our Chinese people, if I knew this, why bother to? When the factory in Phoenix started construction, not only the President of the United States came, but also the CEOs of all important high-tech companies in the United States, and then the important executives of TSMC also went to the United States to cooperate with the performance. The original idea was to work wholeheartedly for the return of high-tech manufacturing to the United States. Speaking of this, I can't help but think of the story of another company in China. In 2019, Netflix released a documentary called American Factory. This American Factory is about a very important Chinese auto glass company, Fuyao Glass. The boss is the well-known Mr. Chao Duong. This documentary was filmed by Mrs. Obama, the then US president, to promote globalization. It's kind of ironic now to think about what the US government is doing right now. The American Factory documentary also won an Oscar at the 2020 Oscars. In this documentary, Chao Duong said that in order to produce nearby, he moved his Fuyao factory, which is an auto glass factory, to Ohio, the United States. Ohio is a famous rust state in the United States. What is the rust state? There are so many original factories here, especially automobile factories. General Motors, one of the three major automobile factories, is over there. When Chao Duong opened this auto glass factory, he recruited more than 2,000 workers who were completely unaware of culture clashes. But the United States is a country where individualism prevails. Fuyao is in the same situation as TSMC this time. It is also managed by the management team sent by China. The management culture of the enterprise is of course Chinese culture. The words of the workers are that Americans are of course an individualistic culture. There is a great conflict between the two, so in this conflict, personally, I think overtime is unreasonable, management is too harsh, work requirements are too high, and 2 days off can never be compromised. Then the management of this Fuyao factory discovered that the normal production process in China, the process that can achieve such a high efficiency, and the process that the company can make money, are now in the United States, and it is difficult to implement because of the opposition of American workers. American workers will naturally tell the union about this matter. What the trade union said immediately raised different objections to Fuyao company, especially Chao Duong himself, based on the principle of protecting workers, some of which were very strong. At that time, Chao Duong felt that this problem was very serious. How serious was it? He said that if a trade union joins, I will withdraw the capital immediately, and I will quit. So everyone began to gradually notice that Chinese people have Chinese culture, Americans have American culture, Chinese culture has Chinese business culture, and Americans have American business culture. What we Chinese people are pursuing in running a business is groupism, brainstorming, and working together, working overtime together, working hard together, and solving work difficulties together to improve work efficiency. In the United States, individuals first pay attention to personal welfare, personal interests, personal salary, personal leisure, and personal protection. There is a great conflict between the two. In fact, what I emphasize is that different companies with different cultures will produce completely different results when running a company. Western societies as a whole think their own individualistic culture is right. So it's not true that they think a culture that isn't individualistic. So this conflict suddenly becomes a choice between right and wrong. Therefore, whether it is a traditional manufacturing industry such as Fuyao Glass or a high-tech enterprise such as TSMC, if you move to the United States, you will have conflicts with the individualistic trade unions in the United States, and this conflict will become more and more serious, and in the end you will have to leave early. So it's still the same old Chinese saying, if I knew it was so, why bother? At the beginning, TSMC could not continue to operate in the United States for a long time.